This is a wall down dog, thinking about preparing for something like a hinge. In a hinge, we want some nice chest expansion. We want to think about breathing those lower ribs back. And we want to also be able to open up the sits bones and allow ourselves to be able to sit back and open up through the hips. So we want a nice open chest, some nice back expansion and length through the torso, and allowing those sits bones to stay open, the sacrum to nod forward. So we're in this wall down dog. I'm gonna set up with soft knees, because essentially we want our weight over our midfoot. If it's helpful, you can even elevate the heels just slightly as you get into this position. I'm gonna think about taking my hands onto the wall and kind of pushing away from the wall, so I can think about the ribs being back in space. Watch that you don't drop the chest and round through the upper body. Now thinking about pushing away so we can exhale and get those lower ribs back. Couple things that happen in a hinge a lot are that we flare out through the rib cage. So we want to be able to control that rib cage position, reach long through the arms. So you probably feel a nice lat stretch, and take a nice inhale into the lats, the side body exhale, getting those lower ribs back in space. Now I'm going to slightly bend the knees, and I'm going to think about hinging at the hips and being long. Watch that you don't arch through the low back. So keep a bend in the knees, and as I allow lower ribs back, I want to think about almost trying to straighten my knees, but I'm not straightening my knees. So it's like this push-pull. So I want to think about as if I'm kind of forcing that straighten to happen while I'm sitting back into the hips, feeling almost like this lengthen open on the sits bones on the backside. So I'm pushing into the wall and pulling down with my hands, keeping those lower ribs in check, hinging into my hips, and imagining that I'm pushing to straighten my knees, keeping the sits bones lifted, and I'm going to breathe in this position. We're keeping the sits bones open, so you can think about a wedgie pick, sitting back, opening up, almost thinking like I'm going to straighten my knees out, but I'm not. So I'm generating tension down below, pulling down on the wall, pushing into the wall, sitting back into my hinge position. And if you feel like you're a little too low and tucking under, think about knees bent, pushing back, and staying a little bit higher. Right there is that point. Right where you feel, you can feel the sits bones spread apart and air sort of flow between the sits bones, almost like you can actually breathe into your butt as the air flows down. So in that hinge position, soft knees. We don't want to be through here and arching through that lumbar. So we want to be able to keep the butt open, but without arching through the back. So I'm pushing actively to keep the ribs back, keeping this position, knees bent as I'm hinging back and opening. So I'm not flaring through the rib cage. I'm feeling like I can keep those sits bones lifted, keeping the ribs back and opening up into my hinge position. So that is your wall down dog.